welcome to the Ofrenda. My name is Nicholas Gonzalez. Thanks for coming over. Each episode, we'll get the chance to meet someone new who may not be able to introduce themselves anymore through the stories and memories shared here. Today, my guest is a lovely friend of mine. She's an actress, dancer. She has a wonderful show that she started up as well. Her name is Megan. How you doing, Megan?
Oh, good. How are you?
Good. How's everyone treating you? How's, trying to survive?
It's a doozy. I mean, right now, because the industry is shut down, I am taking a job part-time at Starbucks and, luckily through them, I've been able to get health benefits and, it's scary because I am asthmatic. So, most of this year that we've been in this situation, I've actually been uninsured. So finally, starting this past month, February, I got my insurance. So doing that and teaching dance and fitness at night still, and just trying to stay as proactive as possible with the industry shutting down. I've had a few self-tapes here and there. I keep taking my acting class virtually. So, just trying to stay healthy and trying to stay active as best we can.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And like you mentioned, like since you do have the health problems, how has searching for work and everything kind of affected that?
You know, it's strange because at first I was very paranoid about doing anything, and any work that I was doing was virtual.
Hmm.
But a lot of the work that I'm qualified for at this time and that also provides health benefits, I mean, you kind of had to put yourself out and everything. And I mean, luckily, Starbucks has really great regulations and they're very COVID safe and everything else. So I kind of have this mentality of you just have to do what you have to do right now and take all of the precautions that you're in control of and just have faith in the rest. I know that I'm a very cleanly person. I do everything I can to take all the precautions necessary. I think this whole time has been a really great test of being aware of what you can control and what is kind of out of your hands.
Yeah, that's a good point. The virtual classes that you do teach, what are those like?
They're so much fun. I mean, I teach all ages, all levels, all different things. So, like, for instance, on Tuesday nights, I teach a half hour Zumba hip hop class for adults. And it's a lot of the same women that I taught in New York. I mean, that was one blessing because I left New York and moved in with my godmother. And so I'm living in Ewing, New Jersey now. And luckily, I was able to still continue teaching for this New York based company. And obviously we wish we could be in person, but it's still a lot of the same energy, a lot of the same great people. It's just you don't get to really chit chat before and afterwards.
Yeah.
And then I teach for a company called Virtual Babysitters Club that actually started because of the pandemic. And I get to work with kids from all over the world, honestly. I mean, I'm basically teaching TikTok dances and other fun dances and games to kids in Ireland and the UK and in California. Most of my kids right now that I've been having are in California. And, that's something that I would have never been able to do had this not happened. So you try to find the silver lining in each moment.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. Uh, as far as pre-COVID, what were some of the things that you were involved in? Because I know one of the biggest things that you got to do was actually go on TV, right?
Yeah, so I had a supporting guest star spot on Law and Order SVU, and I was very fortunate enough to be directed by Mariska Hargitay herself, which was a dream come true. I mean, she's just such a great inspiration. I mean, she's the highest paid female on television, has three kids, and is just a boss. And she is so kind. And, actually, the Friday before everything shut down, or really like the day before TV had shut down, I had a final callback for FBI.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was my second callback in less than a week. or less than 2 weeks, I believe. So, luckily I got that foot in the door before everything shut down. And the only self tapes I've had have been from the Dick Wolf office and the Jonathan Strauss casting team. I mean, I got a call for Chicago Fire, but unfortunately, a little after I had my self taped, they had shut down production for a little while. And I don't really know how that affected their filming or storyline or anything like that. And then FBI was the other one. They had called me in again, which was really, really great. So, it's a shame that, it's kind of slim pickings right now, but I was very fortunate and happy to get my big toe, pinky toe in the door before the world went into chaos.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully that helps later on when we start going back into more shows and more productions.
I hope so. I hope so.
Cool. Well, who would you like to introduce us all to today?
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and my grandmother, Ramonita Barbosa, was her maiden name, and it became Ramonita Justiniano. It was my mom's mom. And she was such a huge part of my life, and she continues to be such a huge part of my life in ways that she still shows up everywhere. I've unfortunately lost a lot of people, and I lost all my grandparents by the time I was 13, but she, the most out of all of them, has found ways to still find a presence. And I find that to be so fascinating and so necessary. And a lot of my adult life, when I realized I kind of needed the presence of a grandparent, when I was really feeling that, somehow something would always remind me of her, or I would have these very, very, and to this day, I still have very vivid dreams with her as if she has never left. We'll have full on conversations about things that are happening in my life now. So, I want to start with talking about her because, this is kind of a tangent, but working at Starbucks, you meet so many people. And this woman that came in, the first time she ever came in, she looks exactly like my grandmother. And my grandmother was very, very, very young. She was 53 when she passed. She had had my mom at 16. She had my mom's brother, 14 actually. So she was always very young. And this woman came into Starbucks, had to have been around the same age as, maybe a little younger than when she passed. And she started speaking, and she sounded just like her as well. And I felt like I was punched in the stomach. I couldn't speak. And I work with my cousin as well, and she hadn't been working that day. And I called her and I was like, Kiana, you will never believe this, but there's a woman who is like Lela reincarnated. We called her Lela because my older brother couldn't say abuela when he was a kid. So I was like, this is Lela reincarnated, or like a relative or something. Like, we have to be related to her. I don't know how, but we are. So then this woman had come in again, and then I got her name, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I have her name. And then I was like, each time I was kind of trying to learn a little bit more about her. But the one day I had to tell her, please don't take this the wrong way, but you remind me so much of my grandmother, and it has such a special place in my heart. Thank you. And I comped her drink, and she had no idea. So then finally, like this third time she comes in, my cousin happens to be working with me. And I said to my cousin, right as I saw this woman come into the door, I was like, that's her. And immediately my cousin saw her, and she was about to cry. And we finally started asking, like, where are you from? She said she's from Puerto Rico. And we're like, oh my God, my grandma was from Puerto Rico. And they're from parts of the island that actually aren't that far apart. There's a small chance. I mean, I haven't seen her since this last time that my cousin saw her. It's been like almost a month now, but there is a slight chance. I mean, we could be like third cousins twice removed, but I feel like we're related somehow. Mm-hmm. And it was wild because after she left, I even played a home video that I have saved on my phone of my grandmother, and I played it for the other people in the office because I showed them my grandmother's picture, and they're like, oh wow, yeah, that really could look like her. And then I played the video of her voice, and they're like, okay, now that's freaky, because the look is one thing, but like they sound exactly alike.
Well, I mean,
So,
especially like once you got to know her and there was so much more similarities. So I was like, yeah.
yes. And, there's been, I think, between a state of the world, like we were saying before, and me kind of going through some obstacles in my family and, having to set these weird boundaries, it's been a difficult year to say the least. And unfortunately, with my family, it had been a really difficult year for me. But it was starting to get better, and I was starting to resolve things with certain members in my family. And then this woman comes into Starbucks. And again, it goes back to, I just feel like my grandmother always has this strong presence in my life no matter what. And I, every time something like that happens, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize how much I needed that right now. So that's why I wanted to talk about her.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said that unfortunately she passed away while you were younger, but what are some of the fondest memories that you have of her?
Okay, honestly, as crazy as this sounds, I was in preschool and the Macarena had just come out, and she taught me how to do the Macarena and she taught me how to merengue. So, for show and tell, I went to a Christian preschool in my Selena t-shirt doing the Macarena. Like
Yes.
that was something that but that just shows her personality. I mean, she was just such a strong woman, and she loved life. And the thing was, is she had so many battles in her life. My grandma was put through the ringer, but all I can remember about her is her infectious laugh, is the moments of just being so silly, but there was still this respect. It wasn't always like, oh, she's your best friend type of thing. She was a presence that really knew how to nurture you, but also guide you in this disciplinary type fashion that was still loving. She was just all these things that you needed. And, but everything that I have with her, it was just so fun loving. I would spend certain weeks with her over the summer. And another thing, she was a lesbian. She came out after years of being Catholic and even converting to the Pentecostal church. She, at I want to say 40, maybe a little younger, came out of the closet. She was divorced from my grandfather, and this was a huge deal. We're still talking the early 90s. I think she may have come out before I was born, or like maybe when my older brother was born. So we're talking late 80s, early 90s. So, her and her girlfriend would like take me to the beach, and we would have these incredible beach days, and we would be pranking each other and stuff. And it was just, again, this warm, loving environment and inclusive environment that now that I'm older, I'm like, wow, that was important. That was extremely important representation in my life, to be more of an open and kind person as an adult. And I always like to say I'm like a human Looney Tune. And that's because, I had her to like joke around with. And I will never forget the one time we went to the beach. It was her girlfriend Tammy, my Lela, and Lela was taking a nap. And so Tammy and I had gone for a walk, and we found the shell of like this crab, and we put it on my grandmother's stomach while she was asleep. When she woke up, she was screaming, and then we were like putting ice on each other's back, and we're like throwing sand and whatever. But like it's moments like that even though I was so young, I mean, I just loved, and I got my love of food from her. She was the best cook. I mean, even little things like letting me eat Chinese food for breakfast, but then like, making all the rice and beans and fennel and stuff like that for dinner, and like her red beans with potato and, white rice and all the things, you know, all of that. I could eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And I mean, I wish I could still do that, but like people don't realize how much food I can just like shovel down. And like, part of my love for food was from her. She taught me how to make homemade potato chips. We would like, make different things together, and then she'd still put like wrestling on in the background and do her whole like do you smell what the rock's cooking thing. Like, it was just wild. It was wild. And like, some of my love for dancing and love for music, I mean, she had any type of music ever. She wasn't just Latin music. It wasn't just hip hop. It wasn't just this. I mean, she also listened to like Melissa Etheridge and Shania Twain and like, but then like John Cicada and like, she would just listen to all of it. And so I don't know. It's just, I can't pinpoint one specific memory that I have because there's just endless stories. And again, like I never realized until I was older how much I needed this open environment. As life went on and, my older brother had gone to live with her for a period of time, when things got rough, it was, she created a safe space for everybody. And I think now more than ever in the state of this world, this country, I think back on these things and I'm like, I'm so happy that I was taught these things at such a young age, from the funny, silly moments to just having time with her at night, talking about life, whatever that meant, whatever that was, because, I was still young. And even now in my dreams, as crazy as that sounds, just talking to her as an adult, she wasn't perfect, but she was a warrior in her way. And, to take some of those lessons and apply them to now, you look at some people in this country and you're like, that's just how they were raised. And how do we break that? And it's, it's also the cards we're dealt, but, it's people like my grandmother who broke molds and learned how to be fearless. She came over from Puerto Rico. Like I said, she had my uncle at 14, my mom at 16, had my aunt 10 years later. And she was raised by an orphan on the island. And my great grandma was an orphan and she was Black. And a lot of people were very, I mean, they were racist towards her. There's no other way to put it. And then, my grandma came over with my grandfather from Puerto Rico and she hadn't even finished high school. My uncle helped her get her GED. She worked in factories. She wound up becoming a special ed teacher down the line. And she changed so many people's lives. And she did a lot of community work that we didn't even know she was doing until after she passed away. We didn't know how, beyond her own struggles, she went out of her way to help people through theirs. And no matter what happened to her, she worked so hard. And I think that's another thing that I take away from her is like, no, even through all of this, I still have 6 jobs. I'm still doing whatever I need to do in hopes that things are going to get better and that our industry will open up again and we will stay healthy and everything else. It's things like that I got from her that, still continue to live on. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going off on a rant. I don't know if I'm if I'm talking too much. You could shut me up whenever.
No, you're good. No, she sounds like a truly amazing woman. And I mean, in the Latin culture, there's a lot that she had to fight against. Like you said, there's not only the fact that, like you and I know, where like women in certain Latin cultures don't really have a lot of their own power or really say, and she's had to struggle with a lot, especially like you said when she did come out as a lesbian, which is very I guess not kindly looked on, especially during that time in that culture. But the fact that she came out of that and was someone who was very open and carefree with you is actually a very strong testament to her character.
For sure. I mean, like you said, it went from being in the Catholic Church to just doing the extreme, trying to fight these feelings because, like you said, in the Latin culture and as a woman, you're expected to do certain things. I mean, I remember going to Puerto Rico with my mom, and my dad had like asked for milk at breakfast, and he was sitting right in front of the fridge. So my mom's like, "You're sitting right in the fridge. It's right there." And immediately one of my great uncles is like, "You lazy woman." And it's like, wow, you hear about these things back in the day, but, because my grandma was so strong willed by the time I was alive, I mean, my mom was the same way. And I've become that way in my own. I'm a very independent person for the most part. Like, yes, I love relationships and I love being with people, blah, blah, but like, I also am used to traveling the country by myself. I mean, when we were on tour together, I went on our week off to Hawaii by myself. Like,
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let anyone hold me back or tell me what to do. And my grandma really was the one who led that on my mom's side of the family. And it's because of her strength. Like, I was the first female on my mom's side to get a college degree. And, she broke so many molds. And I've worked very hard in my life to continue to break those molds. I think each of us have kind of gone a step above the next. And I think that's so important, especially because I have 5 female cousins who are younger than me on that side. And I want to be a good representation for them. And I want them to do even better than I've done. I want us all to create a stronger, more powerful environment for the women to come in our family. And, even some of my younger cousins, they've come out. And, I don't know that they would have been able to as easily, because even like, there was a part of them that was still a little nervous, but I don't think it would have been as easy if it was like, oh, well, like, if Lela could do it, why can't I? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, my one cousin who came out to me, she was like, oh, I didn't know what you would say. I was like, first of all, I'm in theater. Second of all, our grandma was a whole lesbian. Like, what are you talking about? So, like, it's moments like that, and, fighting, not just being a woman, and, I don't know how many of your listeners know much about the Pentecostal church, but my mom remembers her going to that extreme to kind of hide this for a while by, like, getting rid of all of their records. All of a sudden it was like you could only listen to Christian music in the house. You couldn't wear pants. You couldn't cut your hair. Like, there were so many restrictions all of a sudden. And, my mom didn't really fully understand why, I don't think, at the time. And then it's like years later, like, this was all my mom knew for the most part, because it kind of happened when she was a teenager, I believe. So then all of a sudden she's a young adult, and this life that she knew is just like flipped upside down. So I don't think my mom fully knew how to handle it at first, because it was kind of against everything that she was taught. But then, over time, it's like, no, like, there's no reason why my faith should get in the way of loving people for absolutely who they are and who they always have been.
Right.
That's its own tangent, though. I'm preaching about something else. So,
No, you're okay.
yeah, so I don't know. And so those are, I know it's not many stories. I feel like I'm talking more about who she was. And again, because I just can't think of one specific moment. I mean, unfortunately, by the time I was 11, she had cancer. And she didn't really let on to how bad it was. I believe it was the following week after she had passed away, she was supposed to move in with my uncle, because we kind of were under this impression that we had more time. Again, she didn't want to tell us how bad it actually was. But, it spread to her liver. And she was just a warrior. I mean, when she shaved her head, she would call herself Mr. Clean, say that she was loving it. She would wear, like, one hoop earring. She's like, I look like Mr. Clean. Like, she's still in this scary situation. And again, I was so young. I was, like, in 5th I was in 6th grade by the time she passed. But she never made it scary. She never let anyone pity her. She kind of just took it as, this is still my path, and she still had her faith. Like, she let go of some of the things from the church, but she didn't lose her faith at all. I mean, I think that's just something that I want to carry, and I want something to live on. It's like, no matter how scary something is, which, I think we've all hit our darkest moments. And I don't think I realized until after the fact that I could think of her and be like, Megan, why would you ever think of yourself in this way? Or why would you ever get yourself to this point? It's hard to find faith in moments, but then I think of her and it's like, things will get better. And even if they don't right away, you can find the humor, you can find the light, you can find anything. I know that sometimes humor isn't always the best way to go about things, but like there's ways. I mean, just with her shaving her head, saying she was Mr. Clean, like, it was moments like that where it's like, no, we can find moments to still celebrate who we are in this moment at this time.
Yeah, I do think that it's, like you said, maybe not every moment is appropriate for humor, but like there are moments to like find something positive, I guess, to see.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that will remind you of her, like a particular smell or a place?
So dragonflies. She loved dragonflies, and I feel like that's something random you don't really see very often. At least I don't. I mean, sometimes during the summer I'll see them a little bit more often, but I always wind up seeing them when I need a sign. So whenever I see a dragonfly, I always think of her. When I hear Real Love by Mary J. Blige, it was one of her favorite songs. Also, this is going to be so ridiculous, but when I hear DMX, I think of her. Because she used to like bark like DMX sometimes, being funny.
Okay.
If I'm wearing my leather jacket, because when she came out, she cut all her hair off. She got herself a leather jacket. She was looking like a boss. So, I mean, things as simple as that. Certain smells, like when I smell a particular like flavor in Spanish cooking, and then a mix of like the Marlboros, because she smoked for a little bit. So like when I smell that, trying to think, she loved Obsession, the perfume Obsession. So when I smell that, I mean, it's rare that I ever smell it, but when I smell it, I think of her. Yeah. And then Golden Girls, because there were a lot of times when I would, again, like spend the night or spend the week with her, and I would stay up way past my bedtime watching reruns of Golden Girls. And like listening to Selena music and stuff like that, there's a lot. And I think even if I don't realize it in the moment, I have a moment later on, I'm like, oh, that's Lala. That reminds me of her. And especially now, like working with my cousin, I mean, my grandmother would always spill something on herself, and Kiana's the same way. So she's like, oh, I pulled a Lala. But and my older brother was super, super, super close to her. So, we talk about her a lot, and we talk about the things that remind us of her, and, different signs. It feels like almost like once a week or once every couple of weeks we have a moment like, yo, you'll never believe what happened. And then also just like dancing in general. I mean, she was there for my first recital. Both my grandmothers, I not to go completely off subject, but my other grandmother as well, my grandma Mary, my dad's mom, she passed away when I was 7. But, she would take me through her garden. There's a lot of things that remind me of her. And apparently she would call me and I would tell her about my dance classes. And I told her that when I made it as a big actress or something, I was going to go over to her house and pick her up in my limo. Nice. So, like, both my grandmothers had a strong presence as far as like me starting my career as well. But that's getting a little off topic. I don't know if I'm allowed to veer from just my one grandmother, because I had sent you a couple photos. I sent you a photo of my great grandma. We called her Lita because, again, my older brother couldn't say Abuelita.
Of course.
So, Lita and Lela, those were the two. And I, again, like, briefly talking about that, Lita was an orphan in Puerto Rico and stuff. So, they came over here, and by the time I was born. I mean, she was on dialysis, but there were moments where my grandma and Lita were living together, so I'd go to the house and I'd jump on Lita's bed, even though she was like drained. She would call me Tita. That was like our little spiel. And she would always sneak candy. She wasn't supposed to have any candy. She had diabetes. Like, her kidneys were failing. But she would grab candies from under her pillow and she would give them to me. And she would give me like keychains. She gave me like a little Puerto Rico keychain and a little Bart Simpson keychain, like so random, like as if I was old enough to watch The Simpsons. But, certain smells and things. And again, Lita passed away when I was like 2 or 3, but I still have these vivid memories with her. And, when all of the families could come together and I had my other grandmother there, I mean, I was so happy. It was like my heart was always so full.
Yeah, well, I mean, like when you have very strong women like that, I can definitely see how, like, generation-wise, like they just kind of build onto each other. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they overcame so much, and I I can't even those are moments where I wish I could talk to them and really kind of pick their brains apart. Especially now that I'm in my late 20s and I've done a lot, but I still have so much more I want to do. And I just want to ask them, like, what were you thinking when you did this? What were you thinking when you're like pushing to do X, Y, and Z? And, my dad's dad passed away before I was even born, so I never met him. And, I think of my grandma and I'm like, how did you get through this? Like, how did you still have this entire house for you? And how did you get through like a career and everything else? Because also, she grew up on a farm. So, having that strong presence of having to work really hard and then come to the suburbs in North Jersey, it's like, how did you get through that? And even my grandfather on my mom's side, he had his own struggles and there were reasons why my grandma divorced him. But we never knew those things about him. There were a lot of stuff that my family hid from me while we were growing up because, they wanted us to see him for who he was then and how he's cleaned up. And, he was amazing to all of the grandkids. And, it's like going through all of those struggles and, being the man he is now and like losing the love of his life. Like, how did you get through all this? Like, I think that when we talk about the people we have on the ofrenda, I feel like, I kind of think of Coco because they had their whole team on the ofrenda. I know that not every family's like that, and not every family has like an army behind them in that way. But even when I feel like I don't, I know I have an army of a family behind me. And unfortunately, because so many have passed, I have this whole army on the ofrenda just like piling up with all this food and candles around it.
I mean, I think the good part that you and your siblings have is that you still talk about your family, you still talk about your grandparents and everyone, and so it helps keep them, I guess, more present. And like you said, you definitely do get into situations where you feel like you are alone,
Mm-hmm.
and you may not know what to do, and you run into situations that you've never been in before, and you just kind of think to yourself, like, what am I supposed to do? And so
Yeah.
taking that time to remember all of the struggles that people who are very close to you, all the things that they've gone through, they've been able to press forward. And
Mm-hmm.
so that means that you can as well. And yes, the struggles will be different. I'm not saying that they're all going to be the same or anything else, but the fact that they found ways to move forward, you inherited that as well. That's something that's inside of you.
For sure. And I think that's another way that we're able to keep them alive. Like you said, not just talking about them, but, my younger brother and I don't talk about it as much. But my older brother and I talk about it a lot because he was older, so he knew them better. My younger brother was very young when a lot of this happened, so he doesn't remember much anyway. But, we talk about who in our family has adapted what trait. And I think that's kind of like fun to pick apart, especially about Lela, and be like, well, I think this person has this trait of hers, or this person picked up that trait, or this person acts this way and, makes them Lela in that way. So for me, he'll always say how much I love kids and how good I am with kids. And that was something that both my mom and I really picked up from Lela, like the nurturing aspect, which I'm so thankful that, like, if other people see that and that's what he sees, I love that. Because, my ultimate goal, I kind of want to pull a Debbie Allen. I want to have a Debbie Allen style career where,
Okay.
I do TV, film, and Broadway, X, Y, and Z. But then when I'm done, as far as like, or if I'm fulfilled enough in my personal career, I want to open up my own performing arts center. And, I want to continue to teach the youth of America. And, I've been fortunate on tour and coming back to my hometown. I've taught all over the country, and I've now through VBC, I've taught kids all over the world, and I love it. And, I want to give back, and I want to nurture these students and really give them the education that they deserve. And also for kids who may not be able to afford it. That was the other thing. My grandma taught special ed in a very, very, very low income area. And she went above and beyond to give these kids experiences that they normally would not have. And that's something that I want to take from her, because, I mean, I don't know where some of them are now, but when my older brother was still living in Passaic, he remembers this girl coming up to him at lunch, and he was showing people pictures of my grandma and other family members and stuff. And she was like, "Wait, that's your grandma?" He's like, "Yeah." She was like, "She sent a couch to my family when our house burnt down." She went out of her way to like get the community together to provide certain things that we had lost. And, the way she gave back to that girl and to that family. And, I remember as she was going through chemo, there was another little girl in the school that was going through chemo, and she gave that little girl hope. And, it could be something as big as that, or it's something as simple as some kids that weren't raised with the proper discipline. People didn't cross her, but they still loved her. And I kind of talked about that earlier. I was like, she was able to nurture you in a way that you still had this discipline and respect. And I strive to be that way in any leadership position, whether it's being a dance captain, whether it's being, a barista trainer, whether it's anything, I try to carry that with me.
Right. Do you think, well, let me put it this way. If Ramoncita could come back for a day and you guys could spend the day together, what would you guys want to do?
I'd honestly want to go for a drink with her. As crazy as that sounds, I would just want to go have a drink. Go to a bar. I would want to go to a gay bar with her.
Oh.
It just I would just want to sit down with her and just pick her brain apart and then dance. I think that's the best. I mean, I'm a foodie. I know she loved her food. I want to sit down, have a meal, have a few drinks, let loose, have fun. Yeah.
Nice. I bet she would love the gay bars, especially now.
I know. That's the other thing. I feel like she didn't really get to like embrace it. It's so funny to me because you hear like kids right now that are in their early 20s or like having their 21st birthday, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not getting to experience life because the world shut down, blah, blah, blah." And then I think of her and I'm like, she didn't have nearly half the experiences I had, and she was still full. Her heart was full. She was still full of life, and she didn't let those things, determine who she was or what she experienced, or if she was just fulfilled enough, I guess, for lack of better words. She finally accepted herself as she was, and that was enough. She didn't need to do all of those things. Yeah, it would have been fun, and it would have been really cool for her to experience those things, but I could be wrong because I never talked to her on that level, but from what we saw as kids, like, she was again just so full of life. And then I think again of these kids saying, I'm not living my life, well, it's like, okay, find a way to.
Yeah, well, that's very true, because I mean, all the struggles that she's had to go through, like, it wasn't just like 1 year like we're all kind of experiencing right now. Like, we're all having this, like, 2020 was like a year that didn't really happen, or it was a year where, like, either so much happened or nothing was happening. But, like, for her, it must have been decades where she couldn't be herself.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, all of your memories of her and all of the people that she connected with, they were all so grateful and so positive because
Right.
she gave off that energy.
Yep. 100%. And, you know, you're completely right in saying, I mean, this was decades for her, because I know my brother got to speak to her on this level again because he was older and because he was bisexual and he came out to her and everything else. And, she remembers at a young age having fantasies of this woman with long flowing brown hair. And, she always knew it. She may not have always understood it, but, I mean, fighting that until her 40s. I mean, being so conservative about who she was and very complacent and very, I don't want to say controlled, but it was a little bit controlled because, she let the church really determine who she was and what she did and how she lived her life. And, to allow that for 40 years, I mean, who can complain right now? I mean, worse in my, I don't know, I feel like the longest this is going to go for is realistically probably till fall of 2022, in my opinion. I mean, even beyond then, I think we'll still need to wear masks. But as far as things opening up a bit more and like big concerts and theater and stuff, like, I really don't think until like fall or November of 2022. Yeah. But again, in hindsight, that's only 2 years.
Right, yeah. It's hard when you're experiencing it to, like, sit back and sit with that reality. But like you said, when you can take a step back and take perspective of what's going on, that's 2 years. Yes, they can be 2 very informative years for people. And these are probably going to be changes, like you said, that are going to continue for much longer than the 2 years. But it's still a very short time compared to others who have spent so much of their life not being able to be honest and to actually do what they truly believe is what they should be doing in life. And there are even others who never get to experience that, which is very sad. And the fact that your grandmother was able to actually speak up, and even if it took until her 40s, she still stood up for herself and was, from then on, lived her life the way that she wanted to.
Right. And so, at that point, she at least had 13 years to do so. But, because she did that, I mean, had she not done that at all, like I said, I don't think my cousins or even my brother or anybody else in the family would have had the same strength. I mean, I have a cousin who is going to be 13. She came out to me when she was like 11. Wow. And I was like, you are so lucky and you are so strong to have such a great sense of self at such a young age. I wish I was so strong in myself at that age. Yeah. And I wish so many people had the same courage that she did. She was telling me about how she had a crush on this girl, Allison, and Allison didn't feel the same way. And I'm like, Allison might not know yet. Yeah. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, I don't know. But a lot of, I was like, you are beyond your years. Like, Oh, or maybe I'm just dated because, again, like, even when we were growing up, I mean, it was still like this whole in between. I mean, I remember some of my friends coming out in college and they had bags packed in case they needed somewhere to go. They knew that they could come to my house and hide out. Like, it was one of those things. Like, but I feel like, it takes someone so strong in the older generations to kind of plant that seed. And it's still not by any means easy, but you can kind of breathe through it more and you can accept the results more, I think.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately not everyone is as accepting, but you have enough strength in yourself and you're determined to stay true to yourself that you are willing and determined to come to terms with not everyone is going to be on board, but you can live your life,
No, yeah.
So I'm so thankful for my grandma planting that seed. And again, that's another way that her spirit lives on, because again, my cousin never knew her, unfortunately. I mean, my aunt has 4 girls, and the oldest had some time with my grandmother. The second oldest only had a month with her, and she was 1 month when my grandma passed. So the 2 younger ones have no idea, and it's so bizarre to me. But they are so much like her in their own ways. It is so wonderful. Even little things like one of them is afraid of sunflowers, and my grandma didn't like sunflowers because she felt like they were always following you. She felt like there's a little devilistic about it. You know what I mean? And I remember one of my cousins told my mom that they didn't like them or they were scary or something, and my mom's like, "Oh, she's Lila." That's Lila. So, it's wonderful being able to still find those moments even with, again, relatives that did not know her in the slightest.
Yeah, well, I guess it's just proof almost that no one really goes away forever. They just change.
Right. Which is, okay, so this is interesting to me then, and I know I'm going off on a tangent because this is ofrenda and whatever, but in that part of Coco when they say the last living person that knew you is vanishes and then you vanish for good. Like when the last living person that knows you is gone, then you're gone for good. Is that real? Do we really believe that?
I don't know. I mean, I personally don't think that we're completely gone. I think it's just more like maybe the last person who knew you or who speaks of you, once they're gone, maybe you just change who you are. You may not be the exact same person, but I mean, I'm going to go off a little bit on my own beliefs, but I personally believe that once we pass away or die, our spirits kind of starts to break apart and live in other places. So you may
Hmm.
not necessarily live as your whole complete self anymore, but parts of you will live on in other places.
I like that. It's
Yeah.
kind of like when he vanishes off in the dust. It's like the dust particles go to different places.
Exactly,
And
yeah. So you don't completely disappear. It's more of who this one particular person in time was is no longer present as one. They're now many, and they're everywhere.
that's so interesting to think about, because then in my head too, I'm like, when does that happen? Like, when will we actually? I mean, I guess, okay. It's harder to say because I know I've said this 3 times already, but my great grandma was an orphan. So we don't know where she came from. We know the people that kind of took her in and raised her,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know her birth parents. We don't know any of that. So it's like, is there anyone alive that would have known? It's wild to think about. It hurts my brain when it's just so far beyond you. It makes me think of time and space and the universe and how small we are. It makes my head hurt in the same way.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot to think about. But yeah.
Right?
But it's, I don't know. I think every now and then to take some time to think about is good. Kind of reflect and think maybe there is more, because I guess when you do take the time, you kind of rethink of how others will see you and whether or not it's even that important, because it may have been nice to know like where your great grandma came from, but that still doesn't change who she was and
Right.
how you feel about her. So
Of course. It's one of those things that it doesn't change anything. I guess like for me, I look at my ancestry.com and I look at my DNA, and my DNA is all over the place. Like I am everything and its mother. It's crazy. Even if it's just like 1%, it's got like, I feel like I have 1% of the whole world in my DNA. So like, you know, with my dad's side of the family, everything's pretty like cut and dry. And like, I don't even know if there's really any limit to like being able to find like the first Fulmer, because there's so much evidence and there's so much structure within, people that came over from Germany and people that came over from Ireland. But Puerto Rico had a big fire at one point and a lot of documentation was completely lost. So we know like super far back that the Barbosas were part of King Ferdinand Barbosa and Queen Isabella that sent Christopher Columbus over Queen. And like we know that the Justinianos come from a part of Italy where the Justinianos, the Justinian Temple, they took over parts of Spain and Italy and created a temple in Naples. So like we know like these like broader, more like history book, like textbooks, but we don't know detail. So it's just kind of one of those things where we're like, I'm nosy. And I'm like, ooh, what's the juice? What's the tea? How'd that happen? Also, like we were running stuff. How did that happen? And then we became farmers in Puerto Rico. Like,
yeah.
How do we go from royalty to rags?
Exactly. Where was that switch? I want to go back and fix that.
Right? So
yeah,
that's kind of the curiosity in me. But like you said, I mean, I wouldn't trade any of it, because then I wouldn't have had a grandma that taught me the strength I needed to. Hey, if we did come from royalty, she could have been a prissy queen demanding stuff, and then I'd be a spoiled little brat. Who knows?
Yeah. So, if people want to find you on social media or on the web, where can they look?
You can find me at Meg_Fulms, Fulms, on Instagram. You can find my website at www.meganelysefulmer.com, and that will also have various links for you to find me on other interwebs.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and introducing us all to Ramoncita.
Thank you so much. Ramonita, actually.
Ramonita, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. It's an easy mix-up. But no, Ramonita Justiniano.
Justiniano. Oh.
Yes. We love her. Thank you for allowing me to speak about her and, again, keep her memory alive.
Of course. Thank you all for stopping by and meeting Ramonita. Feel free to rate and subscribe to us here. If you want to reach out and share your own stories, feel free to email us at storiesattheofrenda@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as well, at storiesattheofrenda. Be safe out there, and we'll see you all soon. Te quiero.